Nicaragua's foreign minister addresses the 74th meeting of the UN General Assembly and calls for the end of interventionist policies around the world. Venezuelan authorities traveled to Vietnam to bolster bilateral relations. And protests intensify in Hong Kong days ahead of China's National Day celebrations. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. Nicaragua took the stand at the 74th UN General Assembly on Saturday. Foreign Minister Denis Moncada demanded the cessation of interventionist policies against Nicaragua and around the world. He also spoke on the targeted media campaign against the Sandinista government.
The government and people of Nicaragua defend the principle of independence and sovereignty as established in the Charter of the United Nations. Therefore, we continue to demand the cessation of any policy of interference that violates international law with interventionist actions in Nicaragua and in sister nations of our Americas and the world, such as Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, Iran, and others. We reassure and reiterate that in Nicaragua we love peace. We strengthen security, promote, defend, and respect human rights in an integral manner. Regardless of the media campaigns that use fake news to seek to impose negative perceptions of our country and of our government.
Minister Denis Moncada explicitly condemned the U.S. blockade on Cuba and expressed militant solidarity with the people of Venezuela, while also rejecting the invocation of the TR against Venezuela, advanced by the OAS.
We condemn once again the criminal blockade against the sister Republic of Cuba and all its extraterritorial measures and ramifications. Nicaragua rejects all coercive economic measures that seek to crush the will and spirit of freedom and sovereignty of the peoples and governments of the world. We reiterate our militant solidarity with the sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, its Bolivarian people, and the constitutional and legitimate government of President Nicolás Maduro. We denounce and condemn any threat of military intervention and the invocation of the obsolete Inter-American Reciprocal Assistance Treaty, TR, which is nothing more than an instrument designed by the government of the United States to threaten or make use of force, and which is advanced within the framework of the Organization of American States, the OAS.
While condemning the expulsion of 2 Cuban diplomats, Nicaragua expressed the urgent need to move the UN headquarters out of the United States to Africa.
We express our rejection and condemnation of the expulsion of 2 Cuban diplomats from the United Nations headquarters in New York in a clear violation of international law, and in particular the headquarters agreement between the United Nations and the government of the host country. Illegal acts such as these confirm the urgent need for the United Nations to be refounded and for the headquarters state to be changed to a sister country in Africa, a continent that has the right to a permanent seat on the Security Council of this organization, and that urgently demands the reinvention and urgent democratization of the United Nations.
Following Venezuela's address to the General Assembly on Friday, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez held a press conference where she once again condemned the invocation of the Rio Treaty by an illegitimate group claiming to represent Venezuela at the OAS. Rodriguez also delivered 13 million signatures collected under the No More Trump international campaign against U.S. aggression.
Well, let's talk about the TR. a Rio Treaty. That's a ridiculous instrument. Venezuela denounced this in 2015, on May the 14th. Now we have a para-government appointed by the U.S. and the satellites to say that they are Venezuela. There is a single Venezuela, and that Venezuela is here with the actual and real representative. Venezuela is indivisible. It's a single country, and it's the worthy and dignified Venezuela known by the world. There is a single Venezuela. So those evidence will be given to the General Secretary together with the 13 million signatures, and also a copy of the agreement of the National Dialogue Accord signed in September. Regarding what Duque said,
the vice president said that unilateral coercive measures have become big business for the financial sector.
The consequences of those measures on more than 34 sanctioned countries, and it's become the big business for the financial sector. Just with touching a button, you steal $2 billion without launching a bomb, but the result is very pernicious. And we saw the statement of the U.S. spokesperson saying that the agony should be increased, suffering should be increased without food or medicine for the people. So the best place to alert and to denounce these measures than here.
Yet another image presented by Colombia's Iván Duque in his 128-page report, which was submitted to the United Nations, has been found to be erroneous, false evidence. President Duque decried a massacre, which he said took place in the Venezuelan state of Bolívar, but this corresponding image was actually taken in Colombia's Catatumbo region. AFP photographer Luis Roballo confirmed that he had taken the photo on September 20th on a trip he made to the Catatumbo. Within 24 hours of Duque's address to the UN, the Colombian outlet El Colombiano revealed that one of the images, which he claimed was evidence of the presence of the ELN in eastern Venezuela, was in fact a photo taken in Colombia's Cauca region. Even Duque's dates were proven wrong. There are now several reports in Colombian media suggesting the use of a third and fourth falsified photo in the report. On Saturday, African citizens in southern Mexico protested against living conditions in migrant camps. The protesters took to the streets in the border city of Tapachula, saying their human rights have been violated as they're victims of continuous violence and discrimination. These demonstrations came after the UN High Commissioner for Refugees visited the city to inaugurate a new center to help register and look after migrants. The ever-intensifying U.S. blockade on Venezuela is now affecting Conviasa flights under the Venezuelan government's return to the homeland repatriation plan. Over 100 migrants in Lima had planned to return home on Saturday, but airport authorities reportedly prevented the aircraft from landing. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Ariaza said that due to repeated and intentional obstacles put in place by the Peruvian government and companies to obstruct the supply of fuel to the humanitarian flight, they were forced to suspend it. He went on to demand respect for the human rights of Venezuelans who wish to return home.
I'm here, desperate. I don't know where I'm going to sleep, where I'm going to eat. I am here with my 2 children. One of my children is a year and 8 months old and needs medical attention. I want to go. I want to go, and they don't allow us to leave. We are tired of the xenophobia. They call us criminals, dogs. I want to leave. Nothing else to say. We want to live for the health of my son.
A delegation from the Venezuelan government, led by the president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, visited Vietnam this weekend to strengthen cooperation between both nations. Let's take a look.
The Socialist Republic of Vietnam gave an honorable welcome to envoys of President Nicolas Maduro, with whom local authorities held various official acts to reinforce bilateral relations. The host of the delegation was led by Permanent Secretary of the Executive Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam, who expressed their satisfaction with this visit and highlighted how closely Vietnam observes Venezuela's many victories. Vietnamese authorities also offered to share their experiences in developing an economy under constant imperialist attack. For his part, But Diosdado Cabello agreed in expanding integration.
We have held talks to bolster our alliance. We spoke about the need for integration, not just of our peoples, but also of our parties and our governments. This is what President Maduro asked of us.
The Venezuelan delegation visited numerous plantations to better understand how Vietnam has developed its food production system and to hasten cooperation agreements in agro-industrial technology.
We must highlight that Venezuela has signed agreements with our Vietnamese brothers and sisters so they can help us develop a new type of rice seed that we can grow in Venezuela in order to provide for our people. One of the reasons for our visit is to reforge our alliance and promote these projects in the areas of food production. We are well aware that Vietnam started from zero, and from nothing they managed to grow their industries and develop their agriculture, and they have done this in a highly organized manner.
In another activity, the Venezuelan delegation was welcomed by Gwen Beto Dayo, the Deputy Director of the National Academy of Public Administration. Here, authorities agreed to establish an exchange program to further their political relationship and educate citizens on the reality of both nations. The fruitful visit is another step to creating a multipolar world where people are not forced to bow down to imperialist interests.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez addressed the 74th meeting of the UN General Assembly on Saturday. During his speech, he condemned the U.S. administration's tightening of the decades-old blockade, which has recently led to fuel shortages across the island.
I denounce before the General Assembly of the United Nations that the government of the United States has begun in recent months to apply criminal, non-conventional measures to prevent the provision of fuel to our country from various markets by using threats and persecution of companies that export to states registered with shipping and insurance companies. As a result, we have faced severe difficulties to ensure the supply of fuel required for the everyday life in the country, which has forced us to adopt temporary emergency measures.
Minister Bruno Rodriguez also had very strong words against a recent decision by the U.S. to impose travel sanctions on the first Secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba, Raul Castro, and his family.
The State Department announced that the first Secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba, Army General Raul Castro Ruz, will not be granted a visa to enter this country. This is an action that is devoid of any practical effect. It is aimed at offending Cuba's dignity and the sentiments of our people. It is done only to please the Cuban-American extreme right. However, the obvious and offensive lies that are being used as a justification, and which I strongly reject in the most energetic terms, reflect the baseness and rot which this U.S. administration resorts to as it drowns in a sea of corruption, lies, and immorality.
Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley blasted the United States over its long-standing blockade of Cuba and its latest tightening of restrictive measures against the island.
Our relationship is based with Cuba on a historical foundation rooted in solidarity, cooperation, and complementarity of a common Caribbean civilization. And we say that the long-standing economic embargo on Cuba continues to be a cause of serious concern. I reaffirm Barbados' strong opposition to this unilateral action, and more so, the recent activation of Article 3 of the Helms-Burton Law imposes new restrictions and further exacerbates the situation. And I ask you here, to what end? To what end? The continued attempt to stop the people of Cuba from living with basic human dignity is unacceptable.
Other Caribbean leaders spoke on the aggression which Cuba and Venezuela continue to face and the need to maintain peace in the Caribbean region.
My government once again calls on the United States to lift the debilitating sanctions against Cuba and those against Venezuela. You're killing innocent people.
The sustained and coordinated attempts to engage in externally imposed regime change in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is but one egregious example of the current trend. We are witness to an illegal economic blockade, eerily similar to the one against Cuba, that we annually and overwhelmingly decry as immoral and anachronistic. We are in possession of indisputable evidence of extensive foreign interference in the sovereign affairs of the Venezuelan people and the frequent, unambiguous threats of military intervention.
We head overseas where dozens of students demonstrated in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, calling for the release of a Sudanese student reportedly detained in Egypt. Walid Abdulrahman was allegedly detained in Cairo for protesting during last week's rallies against President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The demonstrators gathered outside the foreign ministry chanting, "Bring back Walid." The body of Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Mugabe, has been buried in Katooma, his home village, after weeks of wrangling between his family and the government over his final resting place. Mugabe's family had earlier agreed to bury him at a shrine in Harare, as a hilltop mausoleum was to be built for him. But on Thursday, the government abruptly announced the family had changed its mind. Hundreds of mourners assembled for the low-key event, which was initially intended to be a private family ceremony. Mugabe died in Singapore on September 6 at the age of 95, almost 2 years after a military coup ended his 37-year rule.
Mugabe was a hero. People are in pain because he is being buried in the village, and also because of the way in which he was removed from power. This is a man who was our relative and who was highly regarded.
A persistent and invasive plant is compromising one of South Africa's most well-known tourist destinations, the Hartbeespoort Dam. The local community is struggling to clear the plant out of the dam in order to save their livelihoods. Our correspondent Matuba Matlache has more.
Hartbeespoort Dam is a well-known tourism destination, but recently the economic driver, which is the dam, is now under attack. It's a typical day for boat cruising and other water sports that generate the economy of Hartbees, but they have not been happening for a while now due to the weeds that have been growing here. And the community now is asking for funds from wherever they may come from so that they can start the economy and generate it once again. Earlier this year, almost the whole dam was covered by the hyacinth plant, bringing businesses around the dam to the brink of collapse. Local businessman and environmental activist Casper Kruger says it's been a long and costly battle to keep the dam clean.
And we did bring the dam from about close to 40% back to 8% up to last year, average about a year ago. But then money stopped. The moment people see the dam start getting clean, the money starts stopping coming in.
Kruger says it's not only the economy that's suffering in the area.
So the bird life and the fish life is going to start dying because of this.
While the hyacinth plant is making headlines as the killer of the economy in this part of South Africa, Casper Kruger says pollution is also a culprit.
So there is some estates, maybe, they want to save money, and it's true, and they want not to pay all the sewage system or fill up, they want to let it go into the dam.
This problem may seem like a middle-class problem because this is a very affluent area and most people come here for leisure. But the water here is not just for leisure, it's also a source of drinking water for the surrounding communities here in Hartbeespoort Dam. I'm Matiwa Mahlachi in Hartbees for Telesur, South Africa.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en la I.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Violent protesters took to the streets of Hong Kong for the 17th consecutive weekend. Rioters hurled petrol bombs at police and started fires on the streets as police tried to disperse people using tear gas. Hong Kong has been rocked by violence since March as people demonstrate against a now withdrawn extradition bill. Tensions are expected to rise further in coming days as China gears up to celebrate the 70th anniversary of its founding on October 1st, with pro- and anti-government protests planned throughout Hong Kong on Tuesday. On Sunday, video emerged of violent demonstrators repeatedly attacking a passerby, kicking him down as he tried to stand up. Demonstrators alleged that the man had started the altercation and believed he was a supporter of Beijing. Protesters in Lebanon blocked several main roads in Beirut to protest against corruption and the deteriorating economic conditions in the country. Many demonstrators set fires on the streets, while others carried signs and flags chanting "Down with capitalism." Amid heightened security, protesters also gathered in another 3 areas of the country, including the highway that leads to the Syrian capital, Damascus.
We ask all the Lebanese people to forget which religion or political party they belong to and to come out to demand the most basic human rights, to live in dignity, to demand electricity, hospitals, to live a decent life.
We now bring you more stories from around the world.
Austria's conservative leader Sebastian Kurz beamed with pride as he addressed supporters after winning Sunday's parliamentary election. The victory leaves him with the option of forming a coalition with various parties, including the far right and the Green Party. Sunday's election followed the collapse of Kurz's coalition with the far-right Freedom Party back in May after a video scandal forced FPO Vice-Chancellor Heinz Christian Starch to step down.
It's a huge show of confidence. It's a big responsibility, and we're humbly and respectfully accepting it. And I promise we will do our best to do justice to that show of confidence and do the best work we can for our wonderful Austria. Thank you very much for this beautiful moment.
At least 50 people were killed and thousands moved to relief camps after torrential rains in northern India. Densely populated regions on the banks of two main rivers in the state of Uttar Pradesh are among the worst hit, as both rivers have been overflowing over the past 48 hours. The fatalities were mostly caused by house collapses, lightning strikes, drowning and also snake bites in flooded areas.
The condition of the water is very bad. As you can see, even now the water has accumulated to the top of the car. The condition of Varanasi is very bad. Drainage has been very poor.
And in France, hundreds of people braved the rains on Sunday to pay their respect to late French President Jacques Chirac, a political chameleon who dominated French politics from 1995 to 2007. Chirac died last week at the age of 86. More than 30 heads of states are expected to attend a ceremony in Paris on Monday in his honor.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transformed the world today. On Monday, only on Venezuela. In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic expressions, values,